can I pick your brain on something? If you're a small business owner or a leader in any industry, you probably heard the sentence and you had people looking for free advice. But instead of feeling frustrated, which a lot of us feel like, and especially if business is slow or things aren't going the way we expected, instead of feeling frustrated, I want to help you look at this as an opportunity to grow online, increase your podcast downloads, but also look at this as an opportunity to stand out online. And how do we get all of these opportunities without burning out or feeling like we're giving too much advice for free? Well, I'll get into that in this episode. And in case we haven't met, hi, I'm Anna Xavier. I'm the founder of The Podcast Space. I am a podcast marketing expert that helps small business owners, impact-driven entrepreneurs create a content strategy that helps them get to their business goals without overwhelm. And this episode combines all of this. So let's get into it. Okay, I want to start this episode by pointing out that not all freebie seekers are alike. Yes, some people will really want to pull all of the free stuff from you and never want to pay a dime or support you. However, for the most part, they're just, I believe, people who are in their own journey. And first off, they appreciate what we do, but sometimes this can be an opportunity to showcase how we can help them, not only in that situation, but later on. And if you're thinking, Anna, sure, I read it somewhere online that freebie seekers will never turn into paying customers, that has not been my experience at all. So I'll say, I don't like thinking that I'm the exception to the rule, but I really think that there's a way to turn people into paying customers or turn them into more engaged community members. And so I just want you to think about, there are people out there that are in their own journey and they're not ready to work with you just yet. So think about this as almost like a test drive of what you can do for them, right? So the most important thing is that we put boundaries in place, right? We put boundaries in place so that we are not being taken advantage of, or that they don't think and get into this habit of thinking that they can ask for whatever they want. Every conversation with freebie seekers, in air quotes, is an opportunity to really build trust and rapport with our community. For most of us, we're always seeking to engage with our podcast listeners, right? And so we need to look at this as an opportunity to understand and get behind our ideal customers and community members' just wants and pain points and wishes. So just reminding you that there's always opportunity there, but also that's where it's super important to have free content available in some way. And this is why if you don't have a podcast just yet, or if your podcast is on hold, this is why it's important to have a podcast, because it fills a gap in the void of someone being interested in what you do and then being ready to pay. It helps them stay in the loop of what you're doing, and also helps them understand how you think about things differently. And so have I turned freebie seekers and brain pickers into customers? Yes, I have. However, obviously not in the scale that you may think. I'm only a one-person show right here, but there are ways that you can really help them understand that you can serve them in a way for free, but you can help them solve that problem in a way better way if they invest in you. However, this only makes sense. Another one, however, it depends. If you actually have a product or service or a specific interest in the thing that they're asking about, right? So for instance, if I have someone coming to me and asking me about how to optimize their YouTube channel, I can't answer that. I am a podcast marketing strategist. I help with content strategy for podcasters and small business owners, medium-sized business owners, impact-driven business owners. So it's also understanding if there is an overlap for you to actually help them. And if there isn't, I want to give you permission to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't know of that, or I don't have an insight that I think can help you. I've said this a lot a lot of times, and people are like, cool, thank you for, letting me know. Because the reality is sometimes our audience does not know the breadth of what we do and don't do. They don't have the knowledge that we do in the industry or whatever topic you're doing, right? And so the following suggestions that I'm going to be giving you are good for social media posts and private messages, sales calls, emails, audio messages for the show, and anything that relates that is kind of like a communication with someone, even offline meetings with people that you meet at conferences. Because there's always those people that are like have no intention of working with you and they just want to pick your brain for free. So let's start with the first one, DMs or emails that you get. So we obviously have a lot of different ways for people to engage with us. And I always say, don't let messages sit idle because people stop messaging you, right? So even if you don't have an answer, or if you do have an answer, like still answer them. First things first, this was something that came out of a conversation with one of my people on Instagram, Vidya. This was a conversation we had, and I asked her, by the way, I always talk about this, but I think it's so important to remember that these conversations we're having privately with our community, sometimes they're not okay with the details of that conversation being exposed without them being informed of it. So if the content of that post is on a, publicly done, it was on a forum or on your posts, if there's a physical way for anyone to publicly see that, you don't necessarily need to be asking them for permission, but if this was part of a conversation you had privately, I always think it's good practice. It's almost like if someone's telling you a secret and you go and tell the world. So, to protect you, to protect their identity, like just ask them first. And I did ask Vidya if I could talk about this. So she was telling me that she was always receiving a ton of messages from people and she would end up like writing for a long, long time. And then I said, why would you type? Send them the link of the episode if you have a topic on that. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. Like, I never thought of that. So saying something like, hey, I actually have a podcast episode that I covered and it's a lot of in-depth information on what you're asking me. You can check it out here. You're saving yourself time. You're getting more downloads. Win-win. I want you to always remind people that you have episodes on that because sometimes people arrive in their journey later in, let's say like now this is episode 62. I know that I'm always getting new listeners in. So basically, they may not go all the way to like the first episodes and listen to everything. So it's an opportunity for me to help them know the breadth of content that I have online. So think about it as like an opportunity. And then this is something that I actually learned from Denise Duffel Thomas's podcast, Chill and Prosper. And she was talking about how when she gets DMs or emails, she actually asks them to write publicly on that same question. And actually, I ask some of my followers to do that too. So instead of you answering that person, on a one-on-one level, if they write down that question on a post, other people who may be having that same question are going to be able to benefit from the answer. And also in your social media engagement, it will still rank up as like, oh, people are liking this post. So, but all in all, it's good. I also want you to remember that a lot of people that come to us, they don't think they can talk to us. We are not sometimes celebrity level, but we are experts. And so they feel like when we answer them, it's just like, oh, yay, like they took the time of their day to answer that specific question. So if you can do that in a publicly visible forum, basically that's a signaling and more people more than once, they're going to be seeing that, right? Like, oh, so-and-so commented on that post and they got an answer. So that's what I'm going to be doing too, right? So it just kind of instills that awareness that you do reply. I also want you to consider that the freebie seekers, the brain pickers, they have questions that you can benefit from. We're always thinking, what are our listeners thinking about? What are their pain points? And I always talk about how you have to create a listener avatar, a community of people who have needs for you. And that's how you're going to be eventually getting to the episode ideas. And this is giving you the opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth, using their own words, exactly what they're seeking, right? So you don't have to guess, you don't have to go on Google, you don't have to research for hours and hours. What are topics that your audience is interested in? create those episodes, and create those episodes that if you get a lot of freebie seekers, then you know that that topic is probably going to be asked a lot. So that way, it's also like almost a cycle. You're like, haha, I'm hacking the need of future me to answer that question. So I'm getting ahead and writing it, and then eventually making it into an episode. So as search terms go, we tend to talk in our own language, right? Like the expertise that we're in. And so the way that they describe the problem really helps us remind us that there are some words that we are not using. So instead of guessing the SEO terms for this, if you have an article, if you have a podcast episode or a post, they're telling us. So I also want you to look into episode 41 and 42 with Sarah McDowell, where we're talking about tools for SEO, things you need to know about helping your podcast rank higher on Google and podcast SEO specifically. So make sure that you're listening. Of course, links will be in the show notes. But what these conversations also do is giving you endless ideas for episodes. So frequently, I get people telling me, and I'm afraid I may run out of episode ideas at some point. And so if you are afraid of running out of ideas for your show or for your business or for your newsletter, make sure that you're having conversations with a lot of the people who are seeking advice for free. And again, it's always how we use these opportunities. And so sometimes the way someone asks us a question is a little more simplified than the way maybe we covered it in a different episode. So don't be afraid to replicate episodes, change episode titles, change episode descriptions to match what they ask about, right? So this is from the perspective of generating episode ideas and online engagement. But there are so many money-making ideas that you can also come out of just having these conversations with your community, because they're telling you, for instance, if you are someone who has a lot of products that are very pricey, or maybe that's a little bit of a stretch of an investment, consider creating a product that will be more affordable for them. And so I had a lot of ideas for courses just from conversations and modules for my courses from these conversations that I have. So I also had talks, and this is, again, not just me, but like you can think about talks, mini courses, social media posts, subscriptions. And again, if you have a subscription on social media or like a paywall on your social media, you can use these for just paid content, right? And supplement that podcast kind of content train. So if you have paid newsletters, you can say, hey, on the podcast, I'm talking about this, but I'm actually covering that in more detail on my newsletter, because it gives you more flexibility. So again, you can like always combine the podcast as a marketing tool within your arsenal instead of just saying everything has to go on the podcast. Not everything has to go on a podcast. And so another one can be ebooks. So recapping some money-making opportunities from, these conversations you can have, talks, courses, social media posts, subscriptions, paid newsletters, ebooks. If you charge $9 for an ebook, a freebie seeker could probably pay for that, right? So just thinking about how we're looking at all of these situations and how we can help them in their journey. So the most effective way to look at this is to also create a script. So when we're looking at our processes, I talk about how we need to be clever and hack our business and hack ourselves and create systems to help us be more effective, because to create a podcast that is successful, to create content that is going to help us get visible online, we also need to not spend time on these little things. And so I want you to create a script where you have something like, hey, thank you so much for your question. That was so great. I actually have a podcast episode on that. And then to me, I have an Excel spreadsheet of all the titles and the episode links. And so basically you can just copy and paste on there and say, hey, here's the episode. Now, here's something for you to consider. I know that we as creators, as podcasters, we give so much away for free, right? So if we're giving them, and if they're asking for free advice, why wouldn't you also ask back? And what I mean by this is that after you send them the link, they say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That was great. After you say, hey, by the way, Could you please rate and review the podcast on your preferred podcast platform? It would mean the world and it would really help more people. Like, you get free podcast advice or free whatever advice on the podcast. So why not, right? If they're asking, why not ask back? And for the cheeky people out there, the ones that are like, that sounds good, give me more, you can actually ask for a small donation to the production of the podcast. You can say, hey, great question. Here's the link. By the way, if you feel inclined to, you can donate to the podcast, to the production of the podcast, to help with costs. Or say, hey, have you considered becoming a supporter of the podcast? Let's say you do have like office hours with your listeners and you have like a specific time that once a month you answer questions that they have. That could be a great like intersection there. And then alternatively, you can say, as I've said before, hey, that's a great question. Here's what I've covered on this. I would love to help you dig deeper into that problem. So if you want, let me send you the link to my podcast power hour or the programs that I have. Sometimes, again, they follow, and this is like so funny that people who stay on your social media sometimes don't overlap to your podcast. And sometimes if they overlap with your podcast, they may not be on your newsletter. And so somehow they're like, oh my gosh, like I love this person, but they never went to your website to check out the products and services that you have. And so it's helping them fix a problem that they have. Sometimes it's helping them, educate them on the awareness that Freebie will only get them so far, right? So again, feel free to say, I have a solution to help you. And this is a product. You can maybe ask, hey, do you want me to send you the link? Of course, they're going to say yes. And if they say, hey, no, I unfortunately cannot afford it. And then you go, okay, well, then enjoy the podcast. If you have any additional questions, I will definitely keep them for a future episode, or then ask them if they can rate and review the podcast. It's something called reciprocity. So you're giving them something and they feel like, okay, I would like to give something in return, right? So again, from the standpoint of increasing listener intimacy, increasing gold pieces of content that you can use for not only your content planner, for your podcast, for your organic search, right? People who are searching for a topic and they find you because of that title that was written in a way that they asked, into ideas that can be turned into paid products, and even to just help you stand out in a way that you never thought possible because you maybe didn't think of that topic, right? So you're tapping into these new field that you didn't realize that your audience had questions for. So all of these things can happen when we are allowing ourselves to actually think differently about people who want to get free advice. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've been asking for free advice and you've been picking people's brain, these are all things that you're now also equipped to say, hey, I've taken so much wisdom from this one podcast. I'm going to go ahead and share it with a friend or support the show or write a rate and review, because now you have the awareness that, you know what? Maybe I should give something back, even though the host didn't ask for it. So these are just some of the ways that you can think differently about that symbiotic relationship of host and podcast listener. And so let's recap. So from all of our conversations with freebie seekers and brain pickers, we really can do a lot more than just be annoyed at it, right? We can look at this as an opportunity. So number one, of course, we're going to increase the number of podcast downloads that we have on episode downloads. And if you want to think about as well how these episodes relate, and if you need to create something like playlists, that's a great opportunity to help you grow your podcast downloads and top up the charts. And then another one is to create pieces of content that we actually know that people are searching for with the terms that we know they're searching for, that they will resonate with. So that will also help with episode consumption and just more downloads overall. And creating content again for your website that will get more people who are on Google find you, the authority on that field. And also, of course, increase the breadth of products available that you know people are searching for, whether that's something that would be like an instant access course, a paid newsletter, a paid podcast, maybe could be like a shorter get together with me. So many different things that you could eventually turn into products that you never thought about just because of these conversations with people. And last but not least, it also helps you understand that by having these conversations that we're seeking so deeply to communicate, to have the people who are listening to our podcast really talk to us, to not be annoyed that they're asking for free stuff. So, I've been Anna Xavier, and I want to invite you to visit podcastspace.com/podcast for all the resources mentioned on this episode 62. For episode 41 and 42 about SEO, that will be in the show notes too. And I want to invite you to book a time with me, to book a free call, a 30-minute call. The link will be in the show notes to discuss where you're stuck, opportunities to grow your podcast so that you're not feeling frustrated where you are, and so we can grow your podcast and your influence in a way that feels aligned, that feels exciting. And so what would be also the best way to help you do that? Because I'm not a fan of just a one solution for all. So if you need coaching, there'll be coaching. If you need a power hour, there'll be a power hour. If you need a course, I'll tell you which one you can go for. So again, I thank you for being on that side, and I also invite you to perhaps give me a 5-star rating and review to let me know how you found this podcast episode helpful, and if this will, help your business move forward. So I cannot wait to hear from you on Instagram, if that's where you're there. Look at me giving you all of these calls to action. They are completely not what I'm supposed to do, but here we are. I've been Anna Xavier, and I cannot wait to see you in the next episode. Just keep creating content that's imperfect, but moves you forward. Bye.